Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the interwebs at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning and welcome to the program. It is the Tuesday edition of the Michael Dukes Show, and we are live on this wet and rainy Tuesday, but we are ready to go with another dose of truth. Truth Tuesdays. Going to make that stick one way or the other. It is the weekly top three with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Like we like to call it, our weekly, it's not cardio, but it feels just as bad. It's a lot of truth. It's a lot of truth, and it's a lot of good stuff. The big three stories from Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets is going to start off the show with us this morning here as we get things rocking and rolling. And we're going to be doing that here with Brad in just a second. And then we're going to be over there on hanging out in hour two with just you and me. I got some recaps of what Brad's going to talk about, plus some other kind of cool stories from around the state. And then we'll finish up, of course, as always, with Chris Story, the man from Homer, who will give us our weekly positivity update, which we need in so many ways. So it's going to be a fun show this morning, but without further ado, I don't want to take up too much more time because we got a lot to cover this morning on the weekly top three. Let's bring Bradford on. Hello, sir. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budget. Hey, brother, how you doing? How's things going? What's happening?
I'm doing great this morning, Michael. I like your shirt. I know that doesn't mean much to people on the radio, but that's a nice shirt.
You know, I don't know. I don't usually wear like maroon, red, wine color, whatever you want to call, but I don't know. I was feeling it today. I'm usually like blues and greens, but today we'll do the wine red, maroon red, whatever. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So wine Tuesday now.
It's Wine Tuesday. That's exactly what it is. Now, which wine is it? Is it the WHINE or is it the WINE? You know, sometimes I have a feeling, you know, when we say Wine Wednesday, are we talking about which one are we talking about? It's talk radio, so probably it's the first, not the second, unfortunately. All right, well, let's get into this, Brad. We got a lot of stuff to cover, and I had to chuckle as I read through some of the backstory stuff that you sent me for the different topics this morning. I had to laugh because, you know, I would just say history doth repeat itself over and over and over again. It's a little painful out there, but we can see it. So let's talk about number one. You've got an outline provided by our friends over there at the Binkley Family Blog of the top 20% plan for Alaska's fiscal future. And let me just say, it ain't groovy all the way around. Give me the rundown here.
So the Binkley Family Blog, for those who haven't heard that phrase on the show before, is the Anchorage Daily News op-ed page written by the editorial board, written by or for the Binkley family, one of the two. The most recent weekend op-ed was like the perfect encapsulation of what the top 20% agenda is for Alaska fiscal. And basically the subhead is undo Hammond's vision. Here's the summary that's in the op-ed of what they're proposing. The two parts of the permanent fund, it's a two-prong agenda. First, the two parts of the permanent fund, the constitutionally protected principal and the unprotected earnings reserve, should be combined into one. Second, in addition, Alaska needs a hard constitutional limit on how much the legislature can spend, including on permanent fund dividends each year, including the permanent fund dividends under the cap. And basically, this would undo what Hammond's original vision was for how we were going to do Alaska's fiscal future. The first one combined the two funds, the two permanent funds, the corpus and the earnings together, and the earnings reserve together, basically allows. And let me say quickly, the Binkley Family Blog doesn't disclose what's really going on here. So you got to sort of understand the backstory and understand what Hammond's vision was, and understand how the pieces worked to pull this together. But the first one, combining the two funds together, essentially opens up the corpus. Now they will say it doesn't, because they'll say, well, we're going to cap how much we take from each from the overall combined amount, and we're going to cap it at some percentage. But let's go back over the last 10 years. How'd that work for the SBR? Oh, we're just going to take a little bit of the SBR, the statutory budget reserve, to dodge taxes. And then when that was gone, oh, we're just going to take a little bit of the constitutional budget reserve. And of course, the constitutional budget reserve, we have to pay back someday. So, we're not going to take that much of it. And so, that's now essentially drained. And then it was, oh, we're just going to take a little bit of the permanent fund dividend to support government. And just for a while, we're not really going to, we're not going to mess with the underlying permanent fund dividend. We're just going to take a little bit, and we're going to take it a little bit for a while. And now we're on track for the permanent fund dividend, frankly, to be wiped out by the middle of the next decade. So when you look back at history about we're just going to take a little bit, and don't worry, it'll be around. The SBR will be around, the CBR will be around, the permanent fund dividend will be around. When you look back at history, you can see what's happened. It's been, we're going to creep it open a little bit, and just take a little bit for this emergency situation. And then, basically it's gone. Now it's going to take a while to drain $60-70 billion, but we drained $20 billion out of the SBR and the CBR in counting what we've taken out of the permanent fund dividend. We've drained $20 billion in just the last decade. So you think $60 billion is going to take a while. But it's not really.
There's a compounding problem there too, right? So for every $20 billion that you take out of the fund, you essentially remove 25% of its earning potential, 20 to 30% of its earning potential. So it just accelerates the problem, because then the returns are less in those coming years. So you have to draw more. The more you take, the more you have to draw, because the returns are lower. And so it wouldn't be, 20 billion a year, so we've got 30 years, or 20 billion a decade, so we got 30 years. No. It accelerates every year because you're reducing the seed corn. So it could be in as little as 20 years, 15, 20 years, because all of a sudden you're sucking away all the generation power out of it.
And people will say, oh, no, we won't do that. Just like they said, oh, no, we won't do that to the SBR or the CBR or the permanent fund dividend. Oh, no, we won't do that. Don't worry about that. We recognize that we have an obligation to future generations. Well, the CBR is all about future generations. Frankly, the PFD is all about future generations. And we're draining both of those. And why are we doing that? Because we're so desperate to avoid taxes as a revenue source that we'll just drain everything else that we can argue aren't taxes while we're doing it. So I don't have a lot of faith that when we get to the outer range of starting to really rip into the permanent fund corpus, that people are going to say, oh, future generations, no, we're going to keep hands off. We're going to now have taxes on ourselves. I think this is a long-term plan to keep the party going as long as you can for the top 20% non-resident industries, and the oil companies to keep the party going as long as you can by draining down the state's reserves. And, you know, oil's going to run out someday. And so you sort of look at the trajectory of how long you can drain the permanent fund corpus. You sort of look at the trajectory of how long oil lasts. And maybe the oil companies are gone by the time the permanent fund is drained, and so they never have to pay an additional amount for the additional spending.
Well,
anyway,
let's back it up for just a second. And I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt your flow here, but I mean, Hammond's vision for the permanent fund itself was for that day when oil revenues diminished and went away. He wanted to create a pump, a well of money, like we have wells of oil, that once the oil ran dry, we would be able to continue to run the state. And they are, again, wanting to shatter that vision. They want to. They don't want it to be a lump of money that just continues to spin out the right amount. They do not want to append or control their spending at all.
Yeah, the ultimate spending cap is the earnings reserve. If you do drain the earnings reserve under the current Constitution, you can't get to the corpus. And so if you do drain the earnings reserve, then you're going to have to go to taxes, or you're going to have to cut spending. And the desire to avoid taxes will trump the desire to spend, and at that point will curb spending. That's the ultimate spending cap. And what the Binkley Family Blog and others are proposing to do is just blow through that, combine the two, so that the earnings reserve doesn't act as a spending cap. You can just keep on going. And you say, and they'll say, oh, we're just going to limit it to 5% a year. Well, again, let's look at the CBR, the SBR, the CBR, and the permanent fund dividend. We're going to limit it to, no, you're not. I mean, when you get to that outer limit, you're going to say, well, just a little bit more, just a little bit more, just a little bit more, and keep on going in an effort to avoid taxes. Anyway, that's part one, and that's the backstory for why part one is really an attack on the permanent fund corpus. Part two is the spending cap, and everybody goes, yes, absolutely, we must have a spending cap, an effective spending cap. And what the Binkley Family Blog is trying to leverage up on that statement and say, oh, let's kill the PFD while we're at it. Because what a spending cap will do is, let's take Natasha von Imhoff's proposal for a spending cap. It was to tie it to inflation. So you start at some base, pick a base, and you tie the spending cap to inflation, and it gradually creeps up. Well, let's look at other revenues. Oil is at best, according to the latest Department of Revenue forecast, is at best stabilizing. And probably, if some of these fields don't turn out to be as prolific as people think they're going to be, probably we'll start back on the decline, or oil prices may go down. We'll start back on the decline. So what's the grease between the two? You have rising spending. You have declining oil revenues, stabilized or declining oil revenues. What's the grease that's going on between the two? It's a permanent fund. It's a permanent fund dividend. So when they talk about, let's have a spending cap and include the permanent fund dividend inside the cap, what they're really saying is, let's make the permanent fund dividend the grease that will fill that gap between spending and stabilized or declining revenues as long as the permanent fund dividend lasts. Then we'll kick into phase two and go after the corpus. But it's not, the spending cap sounds good. It sounds like something we should all support. But if you really focus on what Hammond's vision was, which was to have the permanent fund dividend be a portion of the state's wealth, a portion of the state's earnings going directly to the state citizens. If you really focus on that vision, what the spending cap is, the way they and Natasha define it, is a way of gradually using up the permanent fund dividend without saying you're doing it.
Right.
If you want a spending cap, just as the Fiscal Policy Working Group said, if you want a spending cap, it needs to be part of a comprehensive solution that includes protections for the permanent fund dividend.
Well, and there's different types of spending caps, right? I mean, that's the thing. There's how the spending cap is constructed is just as important, if not more important, than actually having a spending cap. Because if you include the PFD underneath there and everything else, it bulks that up And it's like that last minute rush at the end of the year with all that state money. If we don't spend all this money, we won't get the same amount next year kind of thing. It's that same kind of mindset of we've got to bulk it up as much as we can before that spending cap kicks in, because and so they include things like the PFD underneath of it, and that blows the whole purpose of the spending cap out of the water.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Including you hit on another point about this, including the permanent fund dividend under the spending cap increases the base amount. So it's inflation on top of an increased base amount, and the permanent fund dividends in there. So it's just more and more grease that they can use to increase spending going on.
This is what we saw in Will Stapp's proposal for the income tax, which was fine right up until the end when they stuffed the PFD
for the spending cap. You said income tax. Will Stapp's proposal for the spending cap.
I apologize for the spending cap. Yeah, but it was the same thing, right? It was great right up till the last minute where they're like, oh, we'll shoehorn the PFD underneath there. And all of a sudden, now it's become not only irrelevant, but dangerous at that point. All right. Well, that's number one. We're going to move over. My God, we just got through the first. I can't believe it. Let's move over to number two. Brad, go give me a quick tease, super quick tease here as we move into number two.
So number two is we're going to talk about how people are creating this crisis that the ADN editorial page is then feeding on and saying we need these solutions because we have a crisis. We're going to talk about what the crisis is and why it's a false crisis.
The quote-unquote fiscal crisis. All right, back with more of the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Brad Keithley, our guest. The weekly top three continues.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, joins us, and we're going. Ron actually, because I was thinking about this as Brad was talking about it, and I'm like, these people, these people, why would they do that? Why would they? And Ron actually brings up the perfect point. How many legislators who are taking the dividend will be in office in 20 years, or for that matter, will still live in the state? And that's a viable question because, I was thinking, why would you do this? Why would you do this if you know the state is going to be upside down and underwater deeply in 20 years? I mean, no more than 30 years, but 20 years, why would you do that? And they're like, well, because they'll probably be dead, right? Or gone, or moved out of state, or it won't be their problem. And I'm just like, how could people be so short-sighted? How can they not care about the future of the state enough? And I guess we're going to get ours and everybody else will have to live on what's left, or?
Yeah, it's essentially, it's Alaska's history, right? People are mining the state. They're mining, they're scraping the state, taking all they can.
Strip mining.
Strip mining. And then going someplace else. And we usually think of that in the context of minerals, or to some degree, we think about that in the context of oil, but it's also true in the context of another asset, the permanent fund asset. And they're gradually strip mining the benefits of the permanent fund, the dividend and the life and the permanent nature of the fund. They're gradually strip mining it because they want to avoid taxes on themselves while they're here, accumulate more wealth for themselves, and then take it, someplace else. Or enjoy it while they're here and, let the future fend for itself. But it's a form of strip mining. It's a form of strip mining. We're familiar with strip mining minerals. We're familiar with strip mining oil. It's a form of strip mining the state's fiscal asset.
And, and just add to that, how about the clear-cut logging? It's the same, right? It's the same concept. We don't care what happens to any of this. We want the resource, the materials, the logs or whatever. If a flood comes in and wipes out the hillside because there's no more tree, we don't care. We're not going to be there anymore anyway. So let's just go ahead and do it. It is the most short-sighted thing that I could think of. It really is the greed, right? That's really what it comes down to. Is it is a snapshot of
the greed, and the entitlement is astounding to me. I just don't fathom it.
I mean, that's exactly what it is. I mean, I want my program. I want things to be set up the way that I want. I don't want to pay for it. I want to keep as much of my money as I can, and then I'll go wander off in the pucker brush when it comes time to retire or whatever. But at least I got mine.
Yeah, it's I mean, Hammond really thought through this stuff. If you think about this deeply enough and think about through what he was trying to do, you really understand that that these two pieces, the protecting the corpus, the permanent nature of the corpus, don't allow a tax on the corpus, and the permanent fund dividend as a way of providing, the state citizens a direct benefit of the state's mineral wealth. Those two pieces were genius, were fiscal genius. And what we have is a select group of the state who figured out that they can prolong their good times, their party, their no taxes party, their spending and no taxes party. Both pieces go together. They can prolong it if they can just get access to the corpus and just eliminate the permanent fund dividend and convert the permanent fund dividend over to their benefit by covering taxes they otherwise should be paying for the increased spending. And so they're undoing both pieces of Hammond's vision. They won't say it. They don't say it. In fact, they claim to still be pursuing it. But that's exactly what they're doing. They're undercutting both pieces of Hammond's vision.
Kyle, I don't know if Kyle's trolling me or what this morning. He says, trees grow back. WTF? Are you a greenie? No, I don't think I think there's a difference between sustainable logging and clear cutting, but I mean, maybe that's just me. I'm a conservationist, not a preservationist, but I can't quite tell if Kyle's just trolling me or trying to poke my buttons this morning. All right, here we go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Brad Keithley, our guest. Let's get through it. Here we go.
Brad Keithley joins us every week to discuss oil, gas, and the economic forecast of Alaska. It's the Michael Dukes Show.
All right, Brad Keithley, our guest. The weekly top three continues. Alaskans for Sustainable Budget. You can find them at ak4sb.com, on Twitter, on YouTube, on YouTube, on Facebook. He's everywhere. And of course, don't forget to catch his column in the Alaska Landmine every week. He's got the chart of the week thing going on. All right, Brad. So number two, we just talked about the top 20%'s overall plan. And now we're going to talk about you say the fake fiscal crisis. We do have a fiscal crisis, but they are spinning it in a completely different way than how I see it and how you see it. Go ahead.
Well, yeah. So the whole predicate for the ADN editorial, for the Binkley Family Blog editorial, was that we have a crisis with the permanent fund earnings. And so we need to do something, the earnings reserve. So we need to do something to attend to that crisis, and that is collapse the two accounts into a single account, and then let's add on this spending cap that includes the PFD as an additional step. But the whole predicate is we have a crisis and we need to do something about it. Well, the crisis is this claimed crisis of running out of money in the permanent fund earnings reserve. And that was captured this past week by an article that James Brooks did for the Alaska Beacon that then got repeated throughout other papers in the state. The headline was, New Alaska Permanent Fund Reports Show Fiscal Crisis Growing Closer. And that is the claimed crisis that the permanent fund earnings reserve is going to be drained. As I read that story, and as I read a couple of other stories, Jack Barnhill did one up in the Fairbanks News Miner. As I read those stories, it dawned on me, we don't have a financial reporter in this state. We have political reporters in this state, or general reporters, but we don't have a solid financial reporter. We don't have somebody who would fit in at the Wall Street Journal or fit in at the Financial Times, the London-based Financial Times. We don't have somebody who understands finances and how the permanent fund corporation is spinning this earnings story. Is they're spinning it as a political story. oh, we have a crisis. Just accept what we say, that we have a crisis. And now we have a political problem that we need to get the politicians to do X, Y, Z in order to respond to the crisis. We don't have anybody who has the financial background that says, okay, wait a second, let's talk about this crisis. Explain to me why we have a crisis. We just have political reporters who are accepting that as a given and then going on and writing the political story. I'm not sure we've got a reporter in this state. I don't mean to be disparaging, but I'm not sure we've got a reporter in this state who off the top of their head could explain the difference between a balance sheet and an income statement. Because that's just not what they report on, and that's not what they dig into. But when you dig into what this story that the Permanent Fund Corporation is spinning about the earnings reserve, you understand that it's a fake story. There's two things. We've talked about them on the show before. We'll probably talk about them a lot of times again. But there's two things you've got to dig into to understand what's going on with this fiscal crisis. First is, what happened to the $8 billion? The $8 billion that got transferred out of the earnings reserve that wasn't required for inflation proofing, wasn't required for any other reason, but got drained out of the earnings reserve and put into the corpus over the last several years. The $8 billion, the first tranche, first $4 billion went explicitly for prepaying for inflation proofing, to allow the corporation to have the money so that when we got to a point where we couldn't inflation proof in some year, they had a reserve in there that they could draw down and say, okay, we've inflation proof because we got prepaid for it. The second $4 billion went among many as for the same rationalization. Okay, we got a few spare dollars in the earnings reserve. Let's stuff it into the corpus, and it'll be there to cover inflation proofing if we get into situations where it's not convenient or not good to inflation proof in any given year. What happened to that $8 billion? Now, I've been tracking it, and I do monthly charts that show what's going on with the $8 billion. And even if you accounted for the $8 billion as prepayments, there's still about $5 billion or so in there that hasn't been used as prepayment, because what's going on is when you get to the years in which there should be prepayment, when you should use the prepayment, they're stuffing more money into the permanent fund corpus to as they say, for inflation proofing, when they have already prepaid for the inflation proofing. So you're double paying for inflation proofing. If that $8 billion hadn't been prepaid over and had been left in the earnings reserve as it was entitled to be left, because there was no reason for it to be transferred to the corpus. If the $8 billion had been left in there, we wouldn't be having a crisis. We wouldn't be talking about a crisis. We'd have plenty of money in the earnings reserve, and the earnings reserve would be doing just fine, thank you very much, and we wouldn't be having this crisis. The second thing that's going on, when you look at the accounting, is they are setting aside it when they get to a fiscal year. They not only accrue the expenses that are due that fiscal year, which are inflation proofing, if they're going to pay inflation proofing that year, plus the POMV draw for that year. They're also accruing an amount for next year's POMV. So when you say, the earnings reserve is drained down, what's going on is they're over accruing, subtracting an amount that should be in another fiscal year. They're over subtracting it in this fiscal year. Those two things are making the earnings reserve look a lot smaller and a lot less than it actually should be if you reflect the prepayments as a prepayment asset, and if you don't accrue for a future year POMV, the earnings reserve would be looking just fine. In fact, it'd be looking better than just fine. But
so what you're saying is these are accounting gimmicks, essentially, to show that the fund is super low. We used all these accounting gimmicks to show that the fund is super low, and that's why our crisis is here. If we used regular accounting and didn't shell game it, it would be okay.
Yeah, exactly right. And so what you've got, this is a predicate then. So now we've got a crisis, right? Because the $8 billion has suddenly disappeared off of the prepayment books, and because we're over accruing for POMV by including the future year's POMV in the current year, all of a sudden we've got a crisis. I mean, if you drain an account enough, if you take enough out of it, if you don't show the assets in it, you can make it look pretty bad. And that's what's going on here. It's a setup then for the ADN and others claim is, oh my God, we got a crisis. So now we need to merge these two accounts together to deal with this crisis. And guess what? That's backdoor access to the corpus. So it's a well thought out. I'll give those who are engaged in this that it's a well thought out plan to create a crisis. And we've got the state's political reporters, because we don't have any financial reporters who can dig into this and understand what's going on. I haven't seen one question about what happened to the $8 billion. I haven't seen one question about why are you double accruing? Why are you accruing future years POMV draws in the current year? I haven't seen one question about that. The political reporters are just accepting as given whatever pablum the Permanent Fund Corporation spits out and says, oh, well, okay, well, now we have a political crisis because we need to do something. And I, James Brooks and I, other reporters in the state, I understand political crises. I understand how to report on political crises. So once you tell me that you have a financial crisis, and I don't have to think about that because you've told me there's a financial crisis, I can go write, story after story after story about the political crisis that flows from that. It's a setup. And it's a setup for things that then show up in the ADN. We have to merge the two accounts together. We have to drain the PFD by including it under the cap.
It's parroting, right? I mean, we've seen this now. The Bert Stedman's talked about it. The Permanent Fund Board's talked about it. All these different, it's and now the newspapers are starting. It's the same thing we saw in the education thing, right? Oh, we flat funded education. Never a deeper analysis of what that is, of what the true dollars were, of the fact that we spent over the BSA. None of those things. It just became a talking point. And the journalists in Alaska have not been digging deep enough in a non-biased way to get both sides of the argument to figure it out. So they're just basically parroting what they're being told. At this point, there's a fiscal crisis and we need to combine the accounts. That's the talking point.
Yeah. And Michael, I don't want to blame the journalists in the sense that, they're not I do blame that they're not digging into it, but we don't have journalists who have the background to dig into it. We don't have financial journalists with financial background to dig into it. I'll say the two best stories on the Permanent Fund Board shenanigans, the two best stories on Ellie Rubenstein and the joke that created with the Permanent Fund Board, they showed up in the Financial Times. The stories that had the best quotes, that did the best analysis of what was going on, were in the Financial Times because David Rubenstein was involved. Ellie's dad was implicated in all this. So the Financial Times picked up on it. But those were the stories that really, I think, ground into the situation and did the best reporting on it. We don't have that. I mean, because Alaska is such a political state, and frankly, because there's probably not a whole lot of people who want to read about balance sheets and income statements, we just don't have the financial reporters, and the Permanent Fund Corporation is taking advantage of that. The ADN, the Binkley family, the rest of the people who are pushing for these proposals are taking advantage of that because we don't have the financial reporters there to dig into it.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Final thought, Brad, on number 2 before we move on?
Well, we need somebody. I mean, this may be a plea to the editors, not to the ADN, because they've already set their course, but maybe the Alaska Beacon. You need financial reporters. You need people who come at these stories. These are financial stories. Alaska is now a financial state. We're now living on the Permanent Fund Corp. We're now living on the Permanent Fund. You need financial reporters. You need people with financial backgrounds to dig into the claims that the Permanent Fund Board Permanent Fund Corporation is making to understand them and to probe them and ask questions about the $8 billion and to ask questions about the double accrual that's going on for POMV.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. That brings us up to number 3. We got more coming up. The weekly top 3 continues on your home for common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. The Michael Duke Show returns right after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, in the chat room right now, in the break. I'm sorry, I'm going back here because Donna made a comment that I was like, here we go. Dunleavy should have vetoed the $1 billion inflation proofing. He and his permanent fund board and Bert Stedman are creating the crisis. And I mean, that's it. This is a manufactured crisis. We've been talking about this for the last few months, especially since the permanent fund board put out that white paper about combining the two funds. And you're right. We had $8 billion in inflation proofing. Why didn't Dunleavy why didn't he veto that extra $1 billion? That would have short-circuited this whole discussion at that point, because then it wouldn't be overdrawing the fund, right? I mean, there'd have to be some other kind of argument in there, but he's either played right into the hands or is part of the whole thing at this point. Yeah,
it's Dunleavy sort of has been an odd character throughout all this. You remember the $4 billion that he said he vetoed that didn't actually get vetoed?
Right.
The $4 billion transfer from the earnings reserve into the permanent fund corpus. He said he vetoed it. It was in his veto message. But then when people went through and looked at where the lines were actually drawn in the appropriations bill, it didn't veto. There wasn't a line through the $4 billion appropriation. And that second $4 billion, the second half of the $8 billion, slipped out of the earnings reserve into the corpus as a result of that. At the time that happened, I said to myself, okay, well, that's not a big deal, because what he'll do is he'll just veto the subsequent inflation proofing to get the $4 billion back into the earnings reserve, as opposed to the earnings reserve being drawn down. You know, he can correct the error that way. He hasn't done it. I mean, he's just kept going with signing the bills that include the additional inflation proofing. So basically he's saying, yeah, I meant to veto the $4 billion. Yeah, I know there was a way I still could have done that, even though some staffer didn't cross out the right line. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave the $4 billion in there, and then I'm going to let them play these games about the earnings reserve being drained. And I don't know, Michael. I don't know if that's if he's being inattentiveness, maybe that's the word I was going, inattentive to the situation, or he's, intentionally letting that $4 billion that he said he was going to veto just stay in there without being a purpose. But either way, it's a key part of how we've gotten to this crisis of the earnings reserve being in crisis, not having enough money. And even the $8 billion, even secreting the $8 billion out of the earnings reserve wasn't enough to tip it into this claim crisis. They had to go and do the future accrual for a future year's POMV in there to get it down into crisis mode. So it's one trick after another. But now they've got James Brooks writing articles about the crisis. And now the ADN has what it needs as a predicate to write the op-eds about, oh my God, we have a crisis. We need to consolidate the two funds.
Yeah, it's kind of it's disheartening to watch for sure. The governor, I mean, I think Kyle makes a valid point. Nobody makes a $4 billion boo-boo. I mean, really, come on, really. I mean, we're told that it was a mistake. Pay no attention to what this hand is doing. Pay attention to what's going on over here. And then, like you said, he could have fixed it, and he didn't. And either he's getting really bad advice and paying attention to people he shouldn't, or he's part and parcel of this whole deal. And that is, that is the frustrating part of this whole thing, especially since we can see, again, where this is going when we start looking at the 10-year plan. I mean, this article that you wrote, this is the chart of the week, and this is back from almost a year and a half ago, 18 months ago. You wrote this article, and it talks specifically about the spending caps and where the money goes and everything else. I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time. This is not anything necessarily new, and yet they continue to act like, oh, don't worry, it'll all be fine. It'll all work out in the end. Too big to fail, and we won't be here when the mushroom cloud goes up. We won't be here anyway, so it'll be fine. When the meltdown happens and the reactor goes critical, we'll be in some other state doing our thing with our money that we got out of here on the way out. I mean, it's just astonishing.
It is, and it's disappointing. I mean, it's disappointing from a number of standpoints. It's disappointing the governor doesn't step in and follow up on what he said he was going to do about the $4 billion, even though he has the opportunity to do it. It's disappointing that we don't have a press that is knowledgeable enough about financial affairs to really dig into this stuff and truly understand what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian says $4 billion boo-boo. The feds say, hold my beer. I mean, yeah, we'll make a boo-boo that'll be $4 trillion. $4 billion, that's a chump change. Piker, you piker. All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. Let's get to it. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay, the weekly top 3 continues. We're on to number 3 from Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, what we'd like to call our Truth Tuesdays. So, Brad, all this different talk and everything else, really progressives, or are they just limousine liberals? And I think we're seeing this play out. I don't know how progressive some of these policies are, more than protectionist than anything else. Give me what you got here.
So, Matt Buxton, who used to be a reporter for the News Miner, and was a good reporter for the News Miner, has turned into a blogger and a columnist, among other things, for the Alaska Current, which is sort of the left equivalent, if you will, of the Midnight Sun. Not the Midnight Sun, the Must-Read. Thank you. Matt used to write for the Midnight Sun. There used to be a blog called the Midnight Sun, and Matt wrote for that for a while. But the Current is sort of the left equivalent of Must-Read. And he wrote a column in the July 31st version of the Current that says progressive challengers lead in key Anchorage area legislative races. And the thing that really triggered me about this, I was just sort of blowing through it. And I understand where you're coming from. The thing that really triggered me was this paragraph. On the Kenai, moderate pro-public school Republican Nikiski Senator Jesse Bjorkman holds a big fundraising lead over extreme right Republican Ben Carpenter. Carpenter has been one of the House's most conservative members, proposing a statewide sales tax to pay for a large corporate income tax cut, and has raised X amount to date. Because Matt's reporting on the amounts raised by the candidates to date. Carpenter has been one of the House's most conservative members, proposing a statewide sales tax to pay for a large corporate income tax cut. Well, a portion of the sales tax revenues that was in Ben's sales tax bill, a portion did go to reduce the corporate income tax down to competitive levels, so that Alaska no longer has among the highest corporate income tax rates. It has one that's competitive, not low, but one that's competitive. But that was only about 30%, 35% of the revenues. The remaining 65 to 70% of the revenues went to replace PFD cuts, went to be substitute revenues for PFD cuts. There is, excuse me, Ben, you probably don't want me to say this, but there is nothing more progressive in the world than using taxes to replace PFD cuts. It is, you're replacing an extremely regressive tax in the form of PFD cuts with a still regressive, but much less regressive sales tax. And in the relative scheme of things, if you replace something that's extremely regressive with a less regressive tax, you're being progressive. You're moving in a progressive fashion. And it just really irritated me that Buxton didn't at least give Ben the credit he's doing. I mean, he's due. Ben's taken a lot of slings and arrows, a lot of shots about stepping out there and saying we need to find a way, we need to find substitute revenues, following through on the fiscal policy working group's proposal of a little bit of everything, and proposing the sales taxes as some of the little bit of everything that we need to be able to stabilize the state's fiscal situation. It just really irritated me that when somebody does something positive, somebody tries to create a solution, that the left just attacks him anyway, and uses as the tool this portion of what the sales tax was going to go for, to soften the corporate income tax, uses that tool to attack him. Ben is more progressive. Again, I'm sorry, Ben, that I'm using that word, but it's true. Ben is more progressive, less regressive. How about that? Ben is less regressive than virtually every other Democrat, virtually every Democrat in the state. He is truly trying to get an approach that is responsive to the economics of 80% of Alaska families, as well as the top 20% non-residents and oil. And he is being more responsive to middle and lower income Alaska families than virtually any of the Democrats or any of the independents out there. And yet he gets labeled as a extreme right conservative member. So I sort of backed up from that and went through the article, and you've got Matt Clayman, progressive Matt Clayman. Matt Clayman wants to drain the PFD. Matt Clayman is as top 20% oil oriented as Natasha von Imhoff. He wants to drain the PFD. He wants to spend it on things he wants to spend it on, as opposed to Natasha spending it on the things she wants to spend it on. But he wants to spend it. He doesn't. He wants to kill the PFD and drain the PFD and use it for spending. That is, as Matt Berman put it, ICER economist Matt Berman put it, that is the most regressive tax ever proposed. Not just the most regressive in the states, it's the most regressive tax ever proposed. And yet Clayman's right out in front of that. Zach Fields, another one, another person that gets mentioned in Buxton's article. Zach Fields, progressive. They are the most regressive legislators that you can find out there, because they're pursuing PFD cuts. And you get somebody like Ben, who is being reasonable about it, trying to walk down the road of the fiscal policy working group, and he gets excoriated for it. So it's just, what we've got, Matt Clayman is the perfect limousine liberal. Spend money, spend it on my program, spend a lot of money, spend it on education, spend it everywhere, but just don't tax me for it. Take the money out of the hides of middle and lower income Alaska families. Just don't tax me. Just don't make me pay for it. Make everybody else pay for it. The ultimate limousine liberal. And yet he gets, the blogs, praise him because he wants to spend and ignore where the revenues are coming from that in turn the progressives are wanting to spend.
It's yeah, I mean, this framing of the whole thing of, oh, I find it interesting that in this whole article, which I read through, it's pumping up the whole progressive movement and all the Democrats and everything else, and then it mentions Bjorkman as kind of their flag bearer in this race versus Carpenter. This has been part of the problem, is that they are, championing all this whole idea of spending without ever asking the question of who pays. Now, in fairness to Ben, when he's, you said, well, he's proposing a tax to offset the PFD cuts. You've proposed the same thing, right? With a spending cap, with a flat tax, having the spending cap and then the flat tax, that does the same thing. So, in fairness, you're proposing something similar, but with a different type of tax. But overall, this whole thing has just been, how much can we spend? How much can we get away with? And it doesn't matter as long as the lower, 60 to 80 percentile of income earners pay the bill, and the top 20% doesn't have to.
I think they fear Ben. I think they're doing this job on Ben and trying to pump up Bjorkman because they fear him. They realize, I think, he understands what the situation is, and he understands that it's going to take some sort of other revenue source, more broad-based revenue source, to deal with the PFD issue, to supplant the PFD cuts as the revenue source. And I think they fear that he's able to articulate this in a way that makes middle and lower income Alaska families understand the problem and understand that this is part of the solution. And I think they're going out of their way to use things to try to pump up Bjorkman and tear down Ben, because they fear what he's able to do. And then they throw in the stuff about Klayman and everybody else about how progressive they are. They're progressive because they just want to spend. They're not progressive on the revenue side, and there's really no one on the Democrat or independent side who is progressive on the revenue side. They just all want to spend, and they all want to take it out of middle and lower income Alaska families. So it's a bizarre situation. Any place else, we'd be naming those people limousine liberals. But yet, the progressive blogs don't want to do that because they don't want to undercut the spending.
Right. And you do look at the amount of money that's coming into these races. And in many of these races, he does point out, and this was the downside for me, that it's usually a 2-to-1, if not 3 or 4-to-1 fundraising advantage to the Democratic candidates, which is unfortunate. Down to the last 20 seconds here, Brad, quick thought.
You look at who's supplying the money. It's Jim Jansen and others in the top 20% that want to keep the top 20% Democrats in place.
Out of time for hour one, folks. The Michael Duke Show returns. Sorry, Brad, we got into that. Maybe, that's the thing. You look at where this money is coming from, and it's shocking. Matt Klayman has outraised Mia Costello 17-1.
Tom McKay, they switched in that race.
Oh, and Tom McKay, swapped out as well. And McKay is still, $144,000 for Klayman, $20,000 for McKay. Who's the one that had Denny Wells? Sorry, Denny Wells, $140,000. Mia Costello has raised just $10,000. So there's some going on there.
It's a combination of unions kicking in a lot of money for those people, including Bjorkman. When you look down at Kenai, it's a combination of unions kicking in a lot of money. But then you look at the individuals, and Ron Duncan's name shows up more than not. Jim Jansen's name shows up more than not. It's and so what you've got the top 20% fears having people like Ben Carpenter in there, who understands what's going on and says, look, we need to be fair to Alaskans, the middle and lower income Alaskans. And so they're funding these top 20% Democrats, knowing they'll spend, but that's okay, by Duncan and Jansen. knowing they'll spend because it won't come from their pockets. So you'll take a segment of the legislature that otherwise might be looking to raise taxes on non-resident industries, non-oil, and on the top 20%. You're taking that segment and you're neutralizing them by giving them money because they've committed to take it out of the PFD. It's an interesting game that the top 20% are engaged in. Interesting donations being given on their side, but it's leaving conservative Republicans sort of behind the eight ball in terms of less money.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budget. So sum it all up for us, Brad, here. Bring it all back for all three of these today. Tie them all together. What are we looking at? I mean, we're looking at a state that has an artificial crisis. How can we get our hands on the big pot of money? We've got all these progressive ideas that are, really regressive more than anything else. Give me your summation here. A couple minutes.
Well, to me, Michael, what's going on is we have people who are thoughtful enough that they've thought through a way to get to the permanent fund corpus. Notwithstanding, the fact that everybody says, "Oh no, we'll never touch the corpus," they've thought through a way to get to the permanent fund corpus. And it's sort of, sometimes as a lawyer, when you're putting a case together for trial, you start with the end result. I want the jury to do this. How am I going to persuade the jury to do this? What's the steps I'm going to have to go through to get to the point where the jury finds X or the judge finds X at the end of the case? And here the game is, how are we going to get our hands on the permanent fund corpus so we never have to pay taxes? Okay, well, we need to combine the two funds so we can start draining the corpus when the earnings reserve is no longer sufficient to fund government. And you back up and you go, well, we need to create a crisis then that says this is why the two funds need to be put together. And then you sort of back up a little bit and, okay, so how do we sort of get at the permanent fund dividend? Well, we create a crisis and we need to get at the permanent fund dividend. We continue spending, but we don't want to pay taxes. And so how do we elect legislators that are going to allow us to do that? Well, we support Democrats who otherwise might come at us and support them in their efforts to raid the permanent fund dividend so they can continue spending. Even though it's continued spending, at least it's not on our dime. We're protected from it. It's coming out of the permanent fund dividend first, and then it'll come out of the permanent fund corpus later by overdrawing that. So from a lawyer standpoint, if you look at this as preparing for trial, it's a great game plan. If the end conclusion you're trying to drive at is get into the permanent fund corpus and drain the permanent fund dividend to avoid taxes on the way there.
Yeah, and I'm just not hopeful that people are going to see it. Ron makes a valid point. Basically at the end of his comment here, he says it will take all of the conservatives to get out and vote to make these, to stop these things from happening, essentially. When someone's trying to defeat a union shill, it's almost impossible to out fundraise them. Only by exposing those with an R by their name as the liberals that they are, it's the only way to defeat them. And it will take all conservatives to get out the vote and make it possible. That's part of the problem, is that kind of this conservative voting bloc, a lot of people are just kind of throwing their hands up in the air. And that's the challenge here. How do we bring those people back to the table?
Well, and you've got a press. I mean, to pick up that piece of today's discussion, you've got a press that's not focused on the financial aspects of it. So they're just accepting whatever storyline Bert and the others want to spin out there. Bert, Natasha, Giesel want to spin out there, and then they're starting into the political analysis of it.
Yeah.
So how do conservatives even know what the issue is if you don't have a financial press that's digging into it and understanding what the pieces are?
Yeah. Brad, final thought here, 20 seconds.
Final thought is keep digging, keep understanding, keep talking about it, keep listening to this show, because I think Michael's one of the places where really the truth and the full understanding of what's at issue is going on.
Well, I appreciate that. We're just trying to make it understandable, taking all these separate pieces and trying to pull them together and make it something that's digestible for the average person who's not into this 24 hours a day. hopefully we've accomplished something with that. Brad, thank you so much, my friend. As always, it's good to see you.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
All right, folks, that does it for hour one. Hour two is coming up. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Let's go.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friend. Welcome to the program. It is hour two of the big radio show for this Tuesday, and we are ready to continue on and dive into it. I got a couple stories that I do want to get into later on the program and discuss. Coming up at the end of this hour will be Chris Story. He'll be coming in to give us our weekly life coaching lesson, which we probably need now more than ever. We probably need. Yes, please, Chris, bring it to us. How do we do this stuff? We'll need that little uplift, especially after the kind of the downer pill that Brad just gave us here in the first hour. If you missed it, we just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top three. Again, not always, it's enlightening, but not always uplifting, the stuff that he puts out there. And I want to talk a little bit about this because Ron Gillum, who's running for State House down on the peninsula, made a comment in the chat room in regards to kind of the whole last hour in general. And I think he gets to the heart of the problem here at the very end, when basically he says what it takes to overcome this, what it takes to overcome all of these issues is for actual fiscal conservatives to get out and vote and make it happen. We are a state that was solidly red up until, 8 years ago. And then we started to see some of the cracks happening, some of the blue leaking in. We're becoming more and more purple in a lot of ways. And I think part of this is by design, that there's been this divisiveness, this polarization that we've seen across the political spectrum, across the nation over the last decade or so, has gotten worse than I remember it for my lifetime. I'm sure it's been, we've had a very contentious, we often look back through the rose-colored glasses of nostalgia and say, oh, if it could only be back at like it was back in the day where, it was pretty contentious. If you read some of the writings and some of the things that went on during some of the original elections, when our founding fathers were still alive and doing their thing, it got pretty down and dirty, right? There got to be some mudslinging. There got to be some commentary. There was no Twitter back then, but when one presidential candidate accuses the other presidential candidate of being a hermaphrodite, and other, things that are even more shocking in today's vernacular than it would be then. I mean, that's, it's pretty nasty. So I'm not saying that there hasn't been contention in politics, in the past, but it has gotten, I think, visibly worse. And at some point I start thinking and start wondering if that is if it's working as intended. If the whole point here was to frustrate people enough, because again, there's a philosophical difference between people who are more, big government progressives, people who favor more, larger, bigger, more involved government, versus the more conservative, independent-minded people who just literally want to be left alone and, to get on with their lives. They don't believe that government is the answer to every problem, and mostly they just want to be left alone. And this frustration level has become so high over the last 8-10 years that I think we're seeing a lot of people who just stopped caring. And maybe that's not fair. Maybe it's not caring. Maybe they just stopped being engaged in it, where they could see it happening. They could see it, they could see what's going on. And they basically have said to themselves, what does it matter? My vote doesn't count. What could one person do? And so I'm just not going to participate in the madness anymore. And I feel that, man. I mean, I do this every single day, right? I'm involved in this morass in one way or the other every single day. And it wears on you. It grinds, it's a grind. You feel it just kind of wearing you down and grinding you down to the point to where you're just like, what difference does it make? Right? How can I do this? So I think the bigger question here is, how do we motivate and reactivate a group of people who are, maybe they're in the middle, maybe they're the independents, maybe they're those swing independents, maybe they're some of the more conservative voters who basically have felt betrayed and abandoned by their party in the state of Alaska, because as we know, the Republican Party in this state has not done a great job in putting forward a smaller government, more conservative viewpoint or game plan or platform. Right? I mean, we know that. And so maybe they're just fed up with the whole thing and they throw their hands up and they wander off in the pucker brush and say, I'm done. But remember, government is what happens to you when you're not paying attention. And that's what we're facing right now. You can ignore it all you want. The problem is that it's not going to ignore you. It's going to continue. And of course, the philosophy on the left, the more progressive side of the political spectrum, on the big government is the answer side of the political spectrum, is that they are very much into the whole kumbaya, we'll do whatever it takes, it doesn't matter. It's just a mindset difference. It's a philosophy difference. It's the idea, again, of the communal aspect of the more progressive mindset versus the independent, rugged individualist, I don't play well with others mindset that we see on the conservative side. So the bigger question becomes, how do we reactivate? How do we motivate people who have become disinterested or disengaged from the process? How do we get them to go out and do something? Now, I mean, I wish I could say that I had some kind of brilliant answer. If you can't motivate, we'll irritate them. Well, they're already irritated, right? They're already irritated and agitated. They can't, they just, they can't take any more of it. So that's not necessarily an answer. So how do we get them motivated to participate? Shelley Hughes, State Senator Shelley Hughes, was on the program a couple 3 years ago, talking specifically about, the sleeping giant in, the sleeping giant of this large conservative mass in Alaska will awaken, should awaken. She hopes they awaken. And that really never came to pass. So I don't have an answer for you, I guess, is the first and foremost thing that I should say. I don't have an answer for you as to how we change this. How do we bring those people, reactivate those people and bring them on board? I guess I'm looking to kind of crowdsource an answer here. Maybe you have an answer and could tell me how we do that. How do we motivate people who literally just want to be left alone? How do we motivate them to get them on board to do what needs to be done? And I just don't know. And Brian says, we've been hearing that canard for decades. Remember the moral majority? It's true. It's true. I mean, we've been hearing the same thing for decades. Oh, one day this sleeping giant will awaken and it will be, one day it'll happen. Well, the one day is either going to arrive or it's going to just meander off into the sunset, and we're going to be stuck with what we've got going on here because people are just so frustrated and they're not even, they'll just live with whatever the madness is. They would rather not be irritated and have to live under something that they don't agree with and not be irritated. And maybe that's just it. Maybe that's what becomes of this whole situation. I don't have the answer, folks. I wish I did. I wish I could tell you that there's just one thing that we could do to get people motivated to do it. Now, I will say that if we don't walk around and talk to our friends, talk to our relatives, our neighbors, our sphere of influence, and start talking about some of this stuff, we're going to continue to lose momentum. We're going to continue to lose that's supremacy, I guess, or the majority kind of idea. If more and more people just kind of wander off in the pucker brush and throw their hands up in the air and say, I'm done, we at least have to stop the bleeding. But we should be talking to everyone that we know, everyone we work with, everyone that we, is in our sphere of influence, and say, what are you doing? Especially if people come to you and complain. That's my favorite thing, is when people come to you and complain about, a certain thing or something that's going on, and you go, okay, so what did you do? Did you go out there and donate money to candidates? Did you give of your time? Did you even vote on some of these issues? That's the question. I mean, that's the question you should be asking everyone. Remember, like I said, what did Brian say? Just because you're interested in government, in politics, doesn't mean that politics is not interested in you. It's the same thing. Government's what's happened to you when you're not paying attention. You may not be paying attention to it, but it is definitely paying attention to you. Richard suggests in the chat room, he said, remind people that want to be left alone that they need to do their part just this one time to let those morons know enough is enough. Maybe the idea that you want to just be left alone is not enough to say, well, my philosophy is I just want to be left alone, so I'm going to leave everybody else alone. You're going to have to come to the conclusion that won't work. You may want to be left alone, but you're going to have to fight for that right to be left alone. Because I do believe a lot of people feel that. I just want to be left alone, so if I leave everybody alone, everybody will leave me alone. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. And unfortunately, to enjoy the fruits of our labor, i.e. being left alone, we're going to actually have to involve ourselves in it, is a truism that I think a lot of people just don't want to face. And it's a problem. It's a problem. And I mean, like I said, I wish I had the 100% solid answer for this, and I just don't. Other than we can't just leave it lie. Somebody's got to pick up the standard and march a few more feet forward until you get riddled full of bullets. And then somebody else will have to come up and pick up the standards and pick it up and walk forward. You know, it's like Saving Private Ryan or, you know, D-Day on the beach. You're walking it forward 10 feet at a time, and then the next person picks up the flag or the charge or whatever and goes on. It's going to require effort and work. And it just seems like those who are more independently minded, it's not like they mind work. They just don't want to be involved. We've got to do something about it. I wish I had an answer as to what that was, but we've got to do something about it. We've got to fight for the right to be left alone. Yes. We got to fight for the right to be left alone. It's a bastardization of the Beastie Boys, but you get my feeling. You know, you get my feeling on that. All right. I got some stories I wanted to talk about. There's some good news stories and just some kind of interesting stories that I thought I would throw out there, especially given I've been doing some reading lately on some World War II history. A couple interesting articles on that. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. And Chris Story's coming up at the end of the hour. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Here we are, hour 2, continuing on here. Kelly, just pull it back a bit. I mean, I know it's hard sometimes. It's hard to be nice sometimes, but we're going to be nice in here. We're going to play well with others, even those we disagree with, because that's how we work around here. No personal attacks. Thank you, Brian. All right. Let me clear out some of these news stories that some of the stories that Brad had brought up, because I don't know. I don't even want to talk about them anymore at this point. Do I even want to talk about this story? There's a story, Sean McGuire over at the ADN, who actually does a pretty good job most of the time on his reporting, has a story out that came out yesterday talking about that there's a subsidy gap in childcare. The assumption, this is what kills me on this. The assumption on this whole thing is that government should be paying for childcare, that there is a subsidy gap, and that somehow the implication of even the headline is that we should be fully funding that subsidy, that we should be fully funding, that there should be no gap. That's the implication of the story of the headline, which I just don't even know if I want to. I don't even know if I want to dive into it. I'm just, oh, Lord. Tag to that, we've got a story about the start times over at the Anchorage school districts, where now it's going to throw people into a tailspin. They're wondering if they're even going to be able to find childcare for their families with all the for their kids with all the new start times. I don't know. I'm getting to the point now to where I think, I didn't take any subsidies for any of my kids' childcare, right? I mean, we just took care of it ourselves. We homeschooled all our kids. Now, yes, we were an idea, so we did receive some state funding, but I spent a lot of money outside of that state funding to educate my kids, right? That was just how it worked. So I didn't look to the government to, subsidize what I had going on. So, now at this point in my life, I'm starting to feel a little agitated and bitter about that whole thing, but we'll get to that. Hello to everybody who's watching us this morning on Rumble. We currently have 7 or 8 folks coming in on Rumble. Now, I do have a problem because I use a piece of software when I broadcast to all the different places, like when it was YouTube and Facebook and Twitch. All the comments would come into one window where I could see the comments and highlight the comments. Like, all the, like this, where you could see Jeannie says she loves history. I could highlight the comments and I would know, and you'd know where they're coming from. If you look at Jeannie's little icon there, you see the little Facebook icon, little circle there down at the bottom, compared to somebody from YouTube. I could see it in my software. I was just going to scroll back and see where, like here's my comment where I posted the link to Brad's article that we were talking about. But you see the little YouTube icon there next to my face down there. So Rumble, for some reason, is not connecting properly to the software. So I don't see the comments unless I go tab over to that page and actually look at them. So I see I think it's Tawny. I think it's Tawny is who it is. Captain, Kathy's there. Some folks have commented this morning. Still having a problem. I can't send messages back and forth without actually going to the page. So we're working through that. We're working through it. Rumble's a little weird. It's got a little some quirks to it that I'm working through. But people said they wanted Rumble, as well as Facebook and Twitch or Facebook and YouTube. I can only broadcast to 3 at a time because I don't have the unlimited plan. I only have the big plan, not the unlimited plan. So anyway, if you want to check it out on Rumble, you can check it out on Rumble. There you go. Let's get to it. All right, here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. Let's do this thing and do some of these. Let's do some of these fun stories, shall we? Let's go.
Public enema number 1. Oh, wait, sorry. Enemy. Public enemy number 1, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Yep. Good morning. Good morning here. How you doing? How's it going? It's the Tuesday edition of the Michael Duke Show. We love having you guys on board and joining us every day, 6 to 8 a.m., Monday through Friday, right here on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. And live around the world, of course, on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and on Facebook and on YouTube and now on Rumble. For those of you out there who are all about the Rumble, which is it's a YouTube type free speech platform where they don't censor you. Of course, it doesn't have the eyeballs that YouTube does, but it is what it is. And people wanted another choice, so now we've given it to them. We're still working through some of the kinks on that, but you could come out and be part of it with us at any time. Just go out there and check it out and join us in the chat room to hang out and talk about all the things that you might want to talk about. Chris Story is going to be coming up here and joining us in just a few minutes. We're going to talk with him about, I don't know what his lesson's going to be today. He always gives us some kind of uplifting life coaching lesson. Sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's mental, like positive mental attitude. Sometimes it's, spiritual health. What do you want to call it? He's a life coach. He's like my life coach. Chris is a very good friend, and I consider him to be a mentor in many ways. And he is just an all-around good guy. He and I have been doing this show together for 10 years, and I love it. I absolutely love it. So I hope you stick around with us. I hope you stick around with us and hang out with us when Chris is here in hour 2. Coming up tomorrow on the program, in hour 2, it will be the Shower Hour of Power. State Senator Mike Shower is going to be joining us. And in hour 1 tomorrow, Harold Borbridge, who's running for the legislature. He is a frequent visitor to the chat room, and we like to call him our resident troll simply because he likes to say things that get people fired up. He's going to be joining us in the 6 o'clock hour tomorrow morning to tell us about his run for the state legislature and how he's going to save us all. He's going to save us all single-handedly. He said that earlier. He says, I'm going to fix it. I can do it all. He's going to do it. So we're going to have Harold on tomorrow, and that should be a fun and educational interview tomorrow morning in the 6 o'clock hour. So Harold Borbridge will be joining us tomorrow for that. Let's go over to a couple of stories. And I just found this to be fascinating simply because I've been doing a lot of reading on World War II, and I was actually watching a documentary the other day about the search for the largest catastrophe during World War II that had the Woman Army Corps. It was a C-47 that went down off the coast of Africa, and they're looking for it. Of the 27 WACs that went MIA during World War II, the 18 of the 27 went down in this one plane crash off the coast of Africa. And so they've been doing a lot of underwater searching and doing some things. There's a lot of history involved in it, and the contribution of the WACs to the cause and to the war effort and everything. Anyway, I've been doing a lot of different reading on all these different things. And of course, one of my favorite stories is the story of the Forgotten War, which of course was the only battle fought on American soil during World War II. And that, of course, was the battle for Attu and Kiska in the Aleutian chain. And I've been to these places, and it's pretty crazy when I think about places that I've actually been to and seen, and to see the battles that were going on out there. Well, there's a story in the ADN from Zachariah Hughes, and he's a reporter that covers government, military, dog mushing, subsistence issues, and general assignments. I hadn't really seen many other things that he's written, but he wrote a story about a young man named Dominic Bush, who works who's a doctoral candidate over at East Carolina University. And they spent some time this summer over around Attu looking for sunken wrecks of World War II ships that engaged each other in battle, Japanese and American ships. And this is a great story. I'm going to post this up in the chat room for folks who didn't get a chance to read it. After reading the story, I really wish that we had gotten some more details on this, because it would have it would be nice to have a deeper story on this for sure. He spent 4 years planning to look for these ships. He spent 4 years putting it all together, going through the archives, looking at detailed reports of the incidents, the actual after action battle reports and everything else. And all that work, after 4 years of work, it all paid off. The team, which went out aboard a crabbing vessel, I love this, the research vessel Norseman II, which was a crabbing vessel that they repurposed for research. They went out and they found 3 ships on the seafloor, and for the first time ever, marking the locations of these vessels, 2 Japanese vessels and 1 American vessel that have been sunk and underwater and not seen by human eyes for over 80 years, 8 decades. The project aimed to locate and survey and study wrecked vessels and debris from the Battle of Attu, which of course was some of the bloodiest 3 weeks of fighting between American and Japanese forces over the control of the Western Aleutian Islands. Now, somebody who was at Chris in the chat room just said the Japanese wanted Alaska. Well, what they wanted was a toehold. It was a multiple pronged thing. What they wanted was, one, they wanted a psychological wedge, spike being driven into the American psyche, that Americans were not untouchable, They did that with Pearl Harbor, obviously, but an actual battle on American soil and taking and capturing and being able to hold that would also be a huge psychological victory. There were also other reasons, because if they controlled Attu or Kiska, they could then launch other sorties into the northern Pacific, which would give them a better shot at getting to America down the road. But this is a fascinating era of history. The 1,000 Mile War, Brian just mentioned, that is also a very great book. The Forgotten War and the 1,000 Mile War, both of those books cover this part of the history of what's going on. In fact, I don't think one of those is not even in print anymore. I have a couple copies of it that I bought, and I went to go buy. I couldn't find them. They're in a box somewhere in storage, and I went to buy another one because it was just easier, and it's not in print anymore. But this is a fascinating piece of history. If you haven't had a chance to go out there and read about Attu and Kiska and the battle in the Aleutians, it is amazing. Now, this is the first time that they actually used a piece of equipment that is normally used for energy research, for looking at the seafloor for oil exploration and energy drilling. It's the first time, or one of the first times, that it's been used for marine archaeology. And so they dragged behind a synthetic aperture sonar device. It captured details of the undersea debris field with exceptional detail down to the centimeter level, which is, if you followed anything about this, you realize that is some amazing resolution for seafloor sonar. And they did find the ships. They found the Kotohira Maru, which was a 5,000-ton freighter that was carrying supplies and fuel to the Japanese soldiers on Attu. They also found the Cheraban Maru, which was only the first one was at 300 feet below. This one was only 30 feet below. And then they found the U.S.-American ship. It's called the SS Delwood. It was a cable-laying ship that had been stringing communication cables between the islands when it was sunk in 1943. And anyway, this is an interesting article. Brian just suggested maybe I try and get Dominic Bush on for an interview. I might try that. That would be an interesting interview. I would definitely be down to take a look at that. But this is one of those pieces of American history that many people don't know of. Many people don't realize that there was a battle fought on American soil during World War II. They think that the closest the Japanese ever got was Pearl Harbor. No, they got closer than that. And this was a bloody, the conditions there were just horrific. And it was almost a month of intense fighting and waiting and weather. And it could have turned out much differently. If we had lost Attu and Kiska, there could have been some real ramifications for that. But anyway, the article is in the ADN. It's called Researchers Locate and Photograph 3 Undersea Shipwrecks, Remnants of Bloody World War II Battle for Attu, from Zachary Hughes. So you can go out there and check it out. And real quick, I wanted to say congratulations to Kristen Faulkner, who is the young lady from Homer who won the Olympic gold medal in her first Olympic event. She won the gold medal for cycling. And she's an inspiration to us all. Alaska's producing a lot of great gold medal Olympians. And so congratulations to Kristen and her family. I'm excited for her. When I saw this, I just had a smile on my face. So congratulations, Kristen. And I guess with that, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back. Chris Story will be joining us in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Wow. Sorry, the trash truck is outside. And it must be a different one because it's making more noise than I have ever heard. You can actually hear it inside the studio. Anyway, just amazing stuff. Yeah, also as a distraction from Midway. Yep, that was another reason. The Forgotten Wars also, they talk about, yes, Korea. Fat Ray said, I thought the Forgotten Wars usually associated with Korea. But yeah, that also, it's been, yes. Again, Atuat-Kiska is not, the battle is not known by many. I mean, it's not a well-known piece of World War II history. But definitely, I would love to bring him on and talk about that. Tawny says it was truth. She says, not until I moved to Alaska did I learn about this battle. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, the Onagan Alaskans who were taken prisoners by the Japanese. There was a bunch of Alaska natives who were taken prisoner and held by the Japanese for almost 4 years in prison camps. A lot of them died. I mean, it was, anyway, it was very cool. Very cool. Oh, Brian just sent me the contact info. Thank you for doing the job for me, my friend. All right. Just what do you get? Okay. All right. I'm sorry. It's just some of the comments are just starting to make me tired. All right. Let's thank you, Brian, for doing that. Let's continue on here and get Chris on the line. What was I doing? I'm Distracto Boy this morning. I'm Distracto Boy. Let me get campfire going there so I know where we're at, what's happening there. We'll get Chris Story on the line. And there we go. See if we can get this in. Fingers crossed. Yeah, buddy. Works like a charm.
Good morning. Did it take?
It worked just fine. How are you, my friend?
I'm fantastic, Michael. The taking out the trash, huh? How appropriate.
So fun. Yeah, I'm like, what is that? It was like bang, crash, bang, beep, beep, beep. I'm like, what is going on out there? It's the trash man. He's taking the trash.
Are you sure it's not the FBI?
It could be. I mean, I'm on a watch list somewhere for something, I'm sure.
Oh, please. Yes.
A good thing that dog's at my feet. Otherwise, they might shoot him on the way in. So it's all good. Anyway, how are you, my friend? How are things going? How's your week been since the last we talked?
Excellent. Yeah, no problems at all. Been a really beautiful week. Weather-wise was amazing, but also just good stuff happening.
I understand.
Homer is a great place.
I understand it's cats and dogs today, though. It's raining a little bit.
A little bit, a little gray, but you can still see the beautiful Kachemak Bay and the mountains and the beautiful trees. And I see a couple of artists frolicking in the fields. Just doesn't matter what the weather's doing.
I see a couple artists frolicking. How do you know they're artists? I'm asking for a friend. I mean, how do you know that they're?
If you know, you know. That's all I'm going to say.
They're frolicking in an artsy way, so they must be artists. That's exactly it.
Exactly. I know my own kind. I am a bit of an anomaly in that I am an amalgamation of conservatism and business and opportunity and capitalism and art.
Yeah, pretty crazy stuff. Mm-hmm. I saw Bill just said Jules Raven won the Alaska lottery, $13.7 million. I mean, okay.
Yeah, something.
I mean,
could have happened to a nicer guy. He and his wife, just both fantastic. In high school, they're still married. Just such a great, what a story.
Yeah, no, it's a great story. I was like, Wow. I mean, my boss said to me, he goes, I was hoping it would be my name because he's been buying a ticket every week, or whatever. And he's like,
Sucker.
I'm hoping it would be my name. And I'm like, man, I'll tell you right now, if I got the nod that I won, if somebody called me and said, you won the, $5 million, $10 million, I said, I probably would. I said, if you won, I said, you'd probably quit. He goes, oh no, I'd give you the rest of the week at least. And I'm like, boy, if I won, I'd be out here to tomorrow. I'd be like, how fast can I pack my stuff?
Question, though, Michael, are you playing? Are you buying lotto tickets?
No, I'm not buying lotto tickets.
Well, then see, how are you supposed to win? What do you mean if you win? You're not going to win. You're not buying tickets.
It was a thought experiment, man. Just a thought experiment.
Oh.
What's the topic for today, Mr. Story?
Blue ocean living.
Blue ocean living.
Tell us a story, Uncle Story.
All right. Blue Ocean Living is coming on board here. Chris Story, the man from Homer. Put him on hold there. We're ready to go. So congratulations to Kristen for winning the gold medal. Congratulations to Jules for winning the lottery. What more can we say? Homer is a beautiful place. All right, let's get to it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Let's do it.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
That's just mean, man. Why? Why do you treat me so mean? I've got more than a pinch. I are smart. I are a high school graduate. I graduated from an Alaska high school. I made it, supposedly. Every week at this time, we bring on the man, the myth, the legend in his own mind, Chris Story, who comes on board to give us, some thoughts, some wisdom, like I said, sometimes it's financial advice. Sometimes it's kind of quasi-spiritual. It's, positivity and uplifting and life choices. Today, Chris Story is going to tell us a little bit about blue water living. The man from Homer at ilovehomeralaska.com, author, potter, realtor, investor, guru extraordinaire, Chris Story. Hello, my friend.
You're so close. I mean, that is a beautiful picture, perfect fairy tale description and introduction, and yet you blew it. It's blue ocean living, but it's close, Michael.
Well, blue ocean.
It's close. And I'm holding my fingers really close together. That's how close you were.
Well, all right. Everybody's a critic. Go ahead, Story. What's up?
I love it. Well, what's up is I woke up thinking about you this morning, and that's disturbing in and of itself. And I thought to myself, what am I going to talk about with Michael that would be intriguing and interesting and yet different than something we've talked about recently? And I just happened to glance over whilst drinking my cup of Captain's coffee here in the library, and I look over to my left, and I happen to glimpse a great book out of the corner of my eye called The Blue Ocean Strategy. And it reminded me of what a game changer it was. 17 years ago, actually about 18 years ago, I read it and completely designed my real estate company around the concept of the blue ocean strategy, and also though integrated it into my life. And I'll give you the synopsis, the quick matchbook version of it is essentially blue ocean strategy, or a blue ocean type of life, for example, for today would be it's represented by innovation, opportunity, and creativity. So abundance is a word you could use there, versus red ocean, which is representative of slogging it out, competing for an ever shrinking market share or piece of the pie, no innovation. You're just merely in the bloody water, in the cutthroat, already competitive and direct, impact kind of market or life, if you will. So as in business, as in life, success is about a creative process, and a blue ocean living or a blue ocean lifestyle is about a whole life, not just success at work, but success at home and in health, as in the rest of your life. So whole living is essentially what we want to talk about.
A holistic, everything wrapping around to one thing to make it your life, essentially.
Understanding that success at work and failure at home equals misery, or millionaire status, be it through a lottery like my best friend just won. I like him. He's a great guy, but suddenly he's going to have a million best friends,
I'm
right?
your best friend.
He's wonderful people. Couldn't happen to nicer people. But millionaire status and then ill health is misfortune. So it's a whole life. It's about creating something out of nothing or adding value to your own life that also, and these two things can go hand in hand. You can add value to your own life and positively impact your community, your family, your future fortune. And, at the heart of it all are relationships. And that is the essence of our teaching at Backyard Millionaire is relationships are going to empower your best self, your best life, your future fortune is dependent upon relationships. And if you look at relationships as going to get, then you're going to end up squeezing those relationships to a point where they don't answer the phone anymore. They avoid you. They avoid eye contact. I just did a consultation with a young man who's an investor and wanted to took advantage of my half-hour free consultation. And at the end of it, Michael, he said, "What can I do for you?" And he has a completely direct set of skills that are opposite of mine. He's in a whole different kind of business and world, and he probably could do something for me. But I thought, isn't that interesting? So he wanted to be in relationship and understands already intuitively at a very young age, oh, I'm not just here to get, I want to also offer something. And I think that's a whole life. I think that's blue ocean living, is that he's going to get something at the same time simultaneously saying, what can I do for you? How can I give
Right.
to you and impact your life positively?
Well, and that's something that I've, personally tried to live by my entire life. And it's always the idea of give more than you get, right? That was always kind of a philosophy that it was instilled in me at a pretty young age. This idea of, um, give more than you take back or more than you get back. And sometimes you give with no thought of, I've helped out lots of people with lots of different things with my skill set, trying to take care of people. And it does come back to you. I mean, it's essentially the law of sowing and reaping, right? You sow so that eventually one day it'll come back. It'll come back to you. And you mentioned something about, the relationships and the networks. I mean, to kind of summate that down, it's always comes back to that kind of philosophy of, it's really not what you know, it's who you know in a lot of ways. And that's true in life in many different areas. But this is a prime example. I mean, how many times have people, oh man, this guy, he struck it rich, or he did good, or he was successful. And it was not because he was necessarily the richest guy, the smartest guy, had the best investors or anything else, but he had a group of people that he worked with that knew him, that helped him out. And if everybody just lifted him up 1 foot, or, all of a sudden he's sky high, because it wasn't what he knew, it was the people that he knew around him.
And what you've done to pour into those lives where they do pay back. Because I've also met people that you think, oh, they're really a good networker. They know everybody. But what you see is them working the room, or you see them angling at a relationship and then snapping their fingers when it's reciprocity time. And you go, oh, okay, there were strings attached to this relationship. And first thing you want to do is cut those strings. And so it's about pouring into not just your own life, but those around you. Yes, absolutely. And being in relationship where if you need something and you just happen to know somebody that might be able to serve you. But like that young man, also reciprocity in the moment, saying, what can I do for you? Is there something I can do for you? And innovation. So at the heart of the Blue Ocean Strategy, which, by the way, an excellent book to read, they talk about value innovation, and you can increase the value proposition that your product, just for a business example, is giving to the world. You can increase the value and reduce your cost to produce it, thereby bringing the cost of the product down. And we see that with a lot of different companies in the world. And it's also available in your life. You can innovate, you can create new areas of time or places in your life you want to expand that doesn't have to rob from your work life. It doesn't have to rob from your family life. I think we have a lot more each of us can go to do. It's like facets on a diamond. I think, I'm constantly trying to push myself in that area. Like, okay, I know I'm spending a lot of time over here, but really what I could do is just squeeze this in over here 30 minutes at a time here and there. And suddenly you realize, oh, there's a lot more to this day. There's a lot more to this life, especially in Alaska, right? Where we've got so much daylight. Next thing you know, it's 10:30 at night or 11, and you don't recognize it. But we have a lot of opportunity. And if you think in terms of blue ocean, not the red bloody ocean, but the blue ocean of opportunity, abundance, relationships, and a whole life, then suddenly I think you just can start moving towards a state of mind that you prefer and choose versus maybe we all can fall into a victim mentality or a place of lack through just some negative experiences along the way.
Right.
Blue ocean living's a choice.
So as I often ask you, what are first steps? I mean, if we want to embrace this kind of holistic aspect of blue ocean living, where it's every part of our life, not just our career, not just our family. It's not just, like you said, if you're successful at your career, but your family life sucks, you're miserable. If you're great at your family life, but your career is horrible and you're struggling just to make a living, then something's, you know what I mean? So how do we take those first steps?
I love the question. I asked in an interview a very well-known author. I asked this in an interview. I said, "Doesn't everybody have a book inside of them?" And this particular author, very well known, said, "Nope." Oh, well, okay. I fully expected a conversation, and there wasn't one. I disagree. I believe you have a story, and I suggest you write your own biography, even if you never intend to publish it. And maybe it's even better. But you write your own biography. Get a journal or do it in your notes page on your phone. Just start writing from birth, start year you were born, and then just start writing your own biography. And what you're doing is you're imprinting on your own mind. Oh, you're drawing a map of like where you've been and what you've got, what you've done. And then you're going to end up on your map or on your journal. You're going to end up with where you are now. So X literally marks the spot and then set a waypoint. Where do you really want to go? You don't have infinite amount of time left. You've got some time. You don't know how much, but what do you want? And it may not even be a financial goal. It could be, doesn't have to be. It could be a lot of different things are out there, but X marks the spot. And for those that don't like to write, literally get a blank piece of paper and draw the map. You're your own cartographer of your life. Go back to the beginning, draw a map with all the different waypoints along the way. And then again, from X, move forward. Where do you want to end up?
That's a big thing. When most people spend more time planning their 2-week vacation than they do planning the rest of their life, that's a big ask. I mean, we got to take this in small bite-sized chunks. And I think the evaluation of where you're at in your life now, most people don't want to do that because it can get uncomfortable. But
writing your biography is exciting. Writing your biography is exciting. It actually is pretty cool. I just started this myself about 2 weeks ago. Calling it the Diary of a Mudman, and it's kind of fun to go back to the beginning and just think about things in that perspective, looking backward, and it's very exciting. So even if you don't like to write, just take some notes.
I can see the first paragraph now. I was born a poor black child in the. Oh, wait a minute, that's a whole different biography out there. All right, Chris Story, the man from Homer. As always, I appreciate you, my friend. Author of the book The Backyard Millionaire, and now The Millionaire Maker, plus the Man series and Born to Live, and he's just the guy, my friend, Chris Story. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you coming on board.
My pleasure, Michael. Thank you.
Hold 1 second here. Don't go anywhere. You can find him at I Love Homer, Alaska, by the way. So coming up tomorrow, Harold Borbridge will be joining us in hour 1, candidate for the Alaska legislature. State Senator Mike Shower in hour 2. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. And I just wanted to take a quick sec because Chris, I mean, you're like, I know you're Mr. Positive, glass half full kind of thing, and I'm not that I'm pessimistic, but sometimes I have a little bit of realism that kind of runs a realism streak that runs through me. There's not going to be a lot of people, Chris, who are going to pick up a piece of paper and go, I'm going to write down my life. I think I'll do that. I think that's a good idea. It's a good start because it embarrasses them, right? I mean, most people don't want to take the time to look at themselves. And I mean, even in the moment, most people don't want to self-analyze, let alone going all the way back to when they were children and then working their way forward. Can you give me a smaller little bite-sized piece? I mean, I'm again, I'm trying to be positive, but I'm also trying to be realistic as to where people are.
Okay, I wrote about, and it was kind of cool to think about it. Just one experience with an incredible teacher. That could be a good place to start. Was there a teacher in your life that made an impact? They said something, did something, or pushed you to be your best self or go beyond what you thought you were capable of? That's a great place to start. Write a paragraph about that, or just reflect. And I think when you do write, you're drawing on a different part of your brain than just your memory. You're helping engage a piece of your brain and a piece of who you are in a different capacity. So I think it is important to write it down and just take a minute. And that particular teacher happened to be my pottery teacher, and it made an incredible impact. And suddenly I started thinking about, what if he hadn't said what he said, which was, he just put his hand on my shoulders. I was throwing at the wheel for the first time, and he goes, "You get it." And he could have said that to 100 kids that particular semester. I have no idea. But all I know is he said it to me, and it made the difference, and it made me believe in myself to a point where it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. I did get it, and I still, 34 years later, am making art in that same vein, and I have his belief in me to thank for that. So writing about it, then suddenly I started thinking about other teachers and other people along the way, and mentors that have said little things, like you mentioned, the Backyard Millionaire. Oscar, the character in that book, hands me a book. Well, really, his name is Charles Huff. And Chuck Huff handed me a book when I was 19. And he said, because he believed in me after like 2 conversations, he said, "You can do this." He said, "If you read this book, it will be equivalent to a 4-year college degree." He knew I didn't have a high school diploma, let alone a degree, had no real chance of getting one. But he knew that enough to believe in me. And that made all the difference. And so all you have to do is go back and think about a few things like that, and it will suddenly, I think, reveal how you got to become who you are and who have you impacted. And I think every one of us has an incredible story, and it's worth revisiting.
What was the book that he gave you?
The Buy and Hold Real Estate Strategy.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well,
Dr. David Schumacher.
Chris Story, the man from Homer, as always, my friend. I appreciate it. One little step at a time. Jeannie's asking, can I get Chris's contact info, please? So what contact info do you want to give today, Chris?
Yeah, 299-7653, text or call, and then also contact me through ilovehomeralaska.com. Email is just fine. 299-7653
or email ilovehomeralaska.com. Well, my friend, as always, you've made an impact in my life in many ways, and you continue to do so. You are my friend. I can't say that enough. I appreciate you, and look forward to talking to you again next week.
All right, Michael, behave.
All right. Thanks, brother. I'll talk to you soon. Bye. He's always got to drop that one little thing at the end. Behave. The Michael Duke Show continues tomorrow, my friends. Thanks for coming in and joining us. We will see you tomorrow with, again, Harold Borbridge and Mike Shower. It should be entertaining, if nothing else, that's for sure. All right, my friends, be kind, love one another, live well. The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.